나왔을 때 Hebrews chapter 7. Mic test, mic test. What in the world? Something happened. Hello, hello. Mic test. Oh, sorry. Ha. Mic test. Okay, better. Hebrews chapter 7. This Melchizedek, king of Shalem, a Kohen of God Ha-Elyon, met Abraham on his way back from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him. Also Abraham gave him a tenth of everything. Now first of all, by translation of his name, he is king of righteousness. And then he is also king of Shalem, which means king of peace. Okay. I'm learning. Okay. Now first of all, there is no record of his father, mother, ancestry, birth, or death. Rather, like the Son of God, he continues as a Kohen for all time. Just think how great he was. Even the patriarch Abraham gave him a tenth of the choicest spoils. Now the descendants of Levi, who became Kohanim, have a commandment in the Torah to take a tenth of the income of the people, that is from their own brothers, despite the fact that they too are descended from Abraham. But Melchizedek, even though he was not descended from Levi, took a tenth from Abraham. Also he blessed Abraham, the man who received God's promises. And it is beyond all dispute that the one who blesses has higher status than the one who receives the blessing. Moreover, in the case of the Kohanim, the tenth is received by men who die, while in the case of Melchizedek, it is received by someone who is testified to be still alive. One might go even further and say that Levi, who himself receives tenth, paid a tenth through Abraham, inasmuch as he was still in his ancestor Abraham's body when Melchizedek met him. Therefore, if it had been possible to reach the goal through the system of Kohanim, derived from Levi, since in connection with it, the people were given the Torah, what need would there have been for another, different kind of Kohen, the one spoken of as to be compared with Melchizedek, and not to be compared with Aharon? For if the system of Kohanim is transformed, there must of necessity occur a transformation of Torah. The one about whom these things are said belongs to another tribe, from which no one has ever served at the altar. For everyone knows that our Lord arose out of Yehudah, and that Moshe said nothing about this tribe when he spoke about Kohanim. It becomes even clearer if a different kind of Kohen, one like Melchizedek, arises, one who became a Kohen not by virtue of a rule in the Torah concerning physical descent, but by virtue of the power of an indestructible life. For it is stated, "You are a Kohen forever, to be compared with Melchizedek." Thus, on one hand, the earlier rule is set aside because of its weakness and inefficacy, for the Torah did not bring anything to the goal. And on the other hand, a hope of something better is introduced through which we are drawing near to God. What is more, God swore an oath, for no oath was sworn in connection with those who become Kohanim now, but Yah-Usha became a Kohen by the oath which God swore when he said to him, "Yahweh has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a Kohen forever." Also this shows how much better is the covenant of which Yah-Usha has become guarantor. Moreover, the present Kohanim are many in number because they are prevented by death from continuing in office, but because he lives forever, his position as Kohen does not pass on to someone else, and consequently he is totally able to deliver those who approach God through him, since he is alive forever and thus forever able to intercede on their behalf. This is the kind of Kohen Gadol that meets our need, holy, without evil, without stain, set apart from sinners and raised higher than the heavens, one who does not have the daily necessity, like the other Kohanim Gedolim, of offering up sacrifices first for their own sins and only then for those of the people, because he offered one sacrifice once and for all by offering up himself. For the Torah appoints as Kohanim Gedolim men who have weakness, But the text which speaks about the swearing of the oath, a text written later in than the Torah, appoints a son who has been brought to the goal forever. Chapter 8. Here is the whole point of what we have been saying. We do have just such a Kohen Gadol as has been described, and he does sit at the right hand of God Ha-Gedulah in heaven. There he serves in the holy place, that is, in the true tent of meeting, the one erected not by human beings but by Yahweh. Sorry. Okay. For every Kohen Gadol is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices. So this Kohen Gadol too has to have something he can offer. Now if he were on earth, he wouldn't be a Kohen at all, since there already are Kohanim offering the gifts required by the Torah. But what they are serving is only a copy and shadow of the heavenly original. For when Moshe was about to erect the tent, God warned him, "See to it that you make everything according to the pattern you were shown on the mountain." But now the work Yah-Usha has been given to do is far superior to theirs, just as the covenant he mediates is better. For this covenant has been given as Torah on the basis of better promises. Indeed, if the first covenant had not given ground for fault finding, there would have been no need for a second one. For God does find fault with the people when he says, "See, the days are coming, says Yahweh, when I will establish over the house of Israel and over the house of Yehudah a new covenant. It will not be like the covenant which I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by their hand and led them forth out of the land of Egypt, because they for their part did not remain faithful to my covenant. So I for my part stopped concerning myself with them, says Yahweh. For this is the covenant which I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yahweh. I will put my Torah in their minds and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. None of them will teach his fellow citizen or his brother, saying, Know Yahweh, for all will know me, from the least of them to the greatest, because I will be merciful toward their wickednesses and remember their sins no more. By using the term new, he has made the first covenant old, and something being made old, something in the process of aging, is on its way to vanishing together. Okay. Chapter 9. Now the first covenant had both regulations for worship and a holy place here on earth. A tent was set up, the outer one, which was called the holy place. In it were the menorah, the table and the bread of the presence. Behind the second paroquet was a tent called the holiest place, which had the golden altar for burning incense, and the ark of the covenant entirely covered with gold. In the ark were the gold jar containing the man, Aharon's rod that sprouted, and the stone tablets of the covenant, and above it were the cherubim representing the Shekinah, casting their shadow on the lid of the ark. But now is not the time to discuss these things in detail. With things so arranged, the Kohanim go into the outer tent all the time to discharge their duties, but only the Kohen Hagadol enters the inner one, and he goes in only once a year, and he must always bring blood, which he offers both for himself and for the sins committed in ignorance by the people. By this arrangement, the Ruach HaKodesh showed that so long as the first tent had standing, the way into the holiest place was still closed. This symbolizes the present age and indicates that the conscience of the person performing the service cannot be brought to the goal by the gifts and sacrifices he offers, for they involve only food and drink and various ceremonial washings, regulations concerning the outward life, imposed until the time for God to reshape the whole structure. But when the Messiah appeared as Kohen Gadol of the good things that are happening already, then through the greater and more perfect tent which is not man-made, that it is not of this created world, he entered the holiest place once and for all. And he entered not by means of the blood of goats and calves, but by means of his own blood, thus setting people free forever. For if sprinkling ceremonially unclean persons with the blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a heifer restores their outward purity, then how much more the blood of the Messiah, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself to God as a sacrifice without blemish, will purify our conscience from works that lead to death, so that we can serve the living God. It is because of this death that he is mediator of a new covenant. Because a death has occurred which sets people free from the transgressions committed under the first covenant, those who have been called may receive the promised eternal inheritance. For where there is a will, there must necessarily be produced evidence of its maker's death. Since a will goes into effect only upon death, it never has force while its maker is still alive. This is why the first covenant too was inaugurated with blood. After Moshe had proclaimed every command of the Torah to all the people, he took the blood of the calves with some water and used scarlet wool and hyssop to sprinkle both the scroll itself and all the people. And he said, "This is the blood of the covenant which God has ordained for you." Likewise, he sprinkled with the blood both the tent and all the things used in its ceremonies. In fact, according to the Torah, almost everything is purified with blood. Indeed, without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. Now this is how the copies of the heavenly things had to be purified, but the heavenly things themselves require better sacrifices than these. For the Messiah has entered the holiest place, which is not man-made, and merely a copy of the true one, but into heaven itself, in order to appear now on our behalf in the very presence of God. Further, he did not enter heaven to offer himself over and over again, like the Kohen Hagadol, who enters the holiest place year after year with blood that is not his own, for then he would have had to suffer death many times, from the founding of the universe on. But as it is, he has appeared once at the end of the ages, in order to do away with sin through the sacrifice of himself. Just as human beings have to die once, but after this comes judgment, so also the Messiah, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to deliver those who are eagerly waiting for him. Test. Chapter 10. For the Torah has in it a shadow of the good things to come, but not the actual manifestation of the originals. Therefore it can never, by means of the same sacrifices, repeated endlessly year after year, to bring to the goal those who approach the holy place to offer them. Otherwise, wouldn't the offering of those sacrifices have ceased? For if the people performing the service have been cleansed once and for all, they would no longer have sins on their conscience. No, it is quite the contrary. In these sacrifices is a reminder of sins year after year, for it is impossible that the blood of bulls and goats should take away sins. This is why, on coming into the world, he says, "It has not been your will to have an animal sacrifice and a meal offering. Rather you have prepared for me a body. No, you have not been pleased with burnt offerings and sin offerings." Then I said, "Look, in the scroll of the book it is written about me. I have come to do your will." In saying first, you neither willed nor were pleased with animal sacrifices, meal offerings, burnt offerings, and sin offerings, things which are offered in accordance with the Torah. And then, look, I have come to do your will. He takes away the first system in order to set up the second. It is in connection with this will that we have been separated for God and made holy, once and for all, through the offering of Yah-Usha, the Messiah's body. Now every Kohen stands every day doing his service, offering over and over the same sacrifices, which can never take away sins. But this one, after he had offered for all time a single sacrifice for sins, sat down at the right hand of God, from then on to wait until his enemies be made a footstool for his feet. For by a single offering he has brought to the goal for all time those who are being set apart for God and made holy. And the Ruach HaKodesh too bears witness to us, for after saying, This is the covenant which I will make with them after those days, says Yahweh. I will put my Torah on their hearts and write it on their minds. He then adds, and their sins and their wickednesses I will remember no more. Now where there is forgiveness for these, an offering for sins is no longer needed. So brothers, we have confidence to use the way into the holiest place opened by the blood of Yah-Usha. He inaugurated it for us as a new and living way through the Paraket, by means of his flesh. We also have a great Kohen over God's household. Therefore let us approach the holiest place with a sincere heart, in the full assurance that comes from trusting, with our hearts sprinkled clean from a bad conscience, and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us continue holding fast to the hope we acknowledge, without wavering, for the one who made the promise is trustworthy. And let us keep paying attention to one another, in order to spur each other on to love and good deeds, not neglecting our own congregational meetings, as some have made a practice of doing, but rather encouraging each other. And let us do this all the more as you see the day approaching. For if you deliberately continue to sin after receiving the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins, but only the terrifying prospect of judgment, of raging fire that will consume the enemies. Someone who disregards the Torah of Moshe is put to death without mercy on the word of 2 or 3 witnesses. Think how much worse will be the punishment deserved by someone who has trampled underfoot the Son of God, who has treated as something common the blood of the covenant which made him holy, and who has insulted the Spirit, giver of God's grace. For the one we know is the one who said, "Vengeance is my responsibility, I will repay," and then said, "Yahweh will judge his people." It is a terrifying thing to fall into the hands of the living God. But remember the earlier days when, after you have received the light, you endured a hard struggle with sufferings. Sometimes you were publicly disgraced and persecuted, while at other times you stood loyally by those who were treated this way, for you shared the sufferings of those who have been put in prison. Also when your possessions were seized, you accepted it gladly, since you knew that what you possessed was better and would last forever. So don't throw away that courage of yours, which carries with it such a great reward, for you need to hold out, so that by having done what God wills, you may receive what he has promised. For there is so little time. The one coming will indeed come, he will not delay. But the person who is righteous will live his life by trusting, and if he shrinks back, I will not be pleased with him. However, we are not the kind who shrinks back and are destroyed. On the contrary, we keep trusting and thus preserve our lives. Chapter 11. Trusting is being confident of what we hope for, convinced about things we do not see. It was for this that Scripture attested the merit of the people of old. By trusting, we understand that the universe was created through a spoken word of God, so that what is seen did not come into being out of existing phenomena. By trusting, Hebel offered a greater sacrifice than Cain. Because of this, he was attested as righteous, with God giving him this testimony on the ground of his gifts. Through having trusted, he still continues to speak even though he is dead. By trusting, Hanok was taken away from this life without seeing death. He was not to be found because God took him away, for he has been attested as having been, prior to being taken away, well-pleasing to God. And without trusting, it is impossible to be well-pleasing to God, because whoever approaches him must trust that he does exist, and that he becomes a rewarder of those who seek him out. By trusting, Noach, after receiving divine warning about things as yet unseen, was filled with holy fear, and built an ark to save his household. Through this trusting, he put the world under condemnation, and received the righteousness that comes from trusting. By trusting, Abraham obeyed, after being called to go out to a place which God would give him as a possession. Indeed, he went out without knowing where he was going. By trusting, he lived as a temporary resident in the land of the promise, as if it were not his, staying in tents with Yitzchak and Yaakov, who were to receive what was promised along with him. For he was looking forward to the city with permanent foundations, of which the architect and builder is God. By trusting, he received potency to father a child, even when he was past the age for it, as was Sarah herself, because he regarded the one who had made the promise as trustworthy. Therefore this one man who was virtually dead fathered descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the grains of the sand on the seashore. All these people kept on trusting until they died, without receiving what had been promised. They had only seen it and welcomed it from a distance, while acknowledging that they were aliens and temporary residents on the earth. For people who speak this way make it clear that they are looking for a fatherland. Now, if they were to keep recalling the one they left, they would have an opportunity to return. But as it is, they aspire to a better fatherland, a heavenly one. This is why God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. By trusting, Abraham, when he was put to the test, offered up Yitzhak as a sacrifice. Yes, he offered up his only son, he who had received the promises, to whom it had been said, "What is called your seed will be in Yitzhak." For he had concluded that God could even raise people from the dead, and figuratively speaking, he did so receive him. By trusting Yitzhak in his blessings over Yaakov, and Esau made reference to events yet to come. By trusting, Yaakov, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons, leaning on his walking stick as he bowed in prayer. By trusting, Joseph, near the end of his life, remembered about the exodus of the people of Israel and gave instructions about what to do with his bones. By trusting, the parents of Moshe hid him for 3 months after he was born, because they saw that he was a beautiful child, and they weren't afraid of the king's decree. By trusting, Moshe, after he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose being mistreated along with God's people rather than enjoying the passing pleasures of sin. He had come to regard abuse suffered on behalf of the Messiah as greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he kept his eyes fixed on the reward. By trusting, he left Egypt. Not fearing the king's anger, he persevered as one who sees the unseen. Give me 1 second. By trusting, he obeyed the requirements for the Pesach, including the smearing of the blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By trusting, they walked through the Red Sea as through dry land. When the Egyptians tried to do it, the sea swallowed them up. By trusting, the walls of Jericho fell down, after the people had marched around them for 7 days. By trusting, Rahab the prostitute welcomed the spies and therefore did not die along with those who were disobedient. What more should I say? There isn't time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Shimshon, Yiftach, David, Shemuel, and the prophets, who through trusting conquered the kingdoms, worked righteousness, received what was promised, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, had their weakness turned to strength, grew mighty in battle and routed foreign armies. Women received back their dead, resurrected. Other people were stretched on the rack and beaten to death, refusing to be ransomed, so that they would gain a better resurrection. Others underwent the trials of being mocked and whipped, then chained and imprisoned. They were stoned, sawed in two, murdered by the sword. They went about clothed in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, mistreated, wandering about in deserts and mountains, living in caves and holes in the ground. The world was not worthy of them. All of these had their merit attested because of their trusting. Nevertheless, they did not receive what had been promised, because God had planned something better that would involve us, so that only with us would they be brought to the goal. Chapter 12. So then, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us too put aside every impediment, that is, the sin which easily hampers our forward movement, and keep running with endurance in the contest set before us, looking away to the initiator and completer of that trusting Yah-Usha, who in exchange for obtaining the joy set before him endured execution on a stake as a criminal, scorning the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Yes, think about him who endured such hostility against himself from sinners, so that you won't grow tired or become despondent. You have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood in the contest against sin. Also, you have forgotten the counsel which speaks with you as sons. My son, don't despise the discipline of Yahweh, or become despondent when he corrects you. For Yahweh disciplines those he loves, and whips everyone he accepts as a son. Regard your endurance as discipline. God is dealing with you as sons. For what son goes undisciplined by his father? All legitimate sons undergo discipline. So if you don't, you're a mamzer and not a son. Furthermore, we had physical fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. How much more should we submit to our spiritual Father and live? For they disciplined us only for a short time, and only as best they could. But it disciplines us in a way that provides genuine benefit to us and enables us to share in His holiness. Now, all discipline, while it is happening, does indeed seem painful, but not enjoyable. But for those who have been trained by it, it later produces its peaceful fruit, which is righteousness. So strengthen your drooping arms and steady your tottering knees, and make a level path for your feet, so that what has been injured will not get wrenched out of joint, but rather will be healed. Keep pursuing shalom with everyone, and the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one misses out on God's grace, that no root of bitterness springing up causes trouble and thus contaminates many, and that no one is sexually immoral or godless like Esau, who in exchange for a single meal gave up his rights as the firstborn. For you know that afterwards, when he wanted to obtain his father's blessing, he was rejected. Indeed, even though he sought it with tears, his change of heart was to no avail. For you have not come to a tangible mountain, to an ignited fire, to darkness, to murk, to a whirlwind, to the sound of a shofar, and to a voice whose words made the hearers beg that no further message be given to them, for they couldn't bear what was being commanded them. If even an animal touches the mountain, it is to be stoned to death. And so terrifying was the sight that Moshe said, I am quaking with dread. On the contrary, you have come to Mount Zion, that is, the city of the living God, heavenly Yerushalayim, to myriads of angels in festive assembly, to a community of the firstborn whose names have been recorded in heaven, to a judge who is God of everyone, to spirits of righteous people who have been brought to the goal, to the mediator of a new covenant, Yah-Usha, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks better things than that of Hevel. See that you don't reject the one speaking, for if those did not escape who rejected him when he gave divine warning on earth, think how much less we will escape if we turn away from him when he warns from heaven. Even then, his voice shook the earth, but now he has made this promise. One more time I will shake not only the earth but heaven too. And this phrase, one more time, makes clear that the things shaken are removed, since they are created things, so that the things not shaken may remain. Therefore, since we have received an unshakable kingdom, let us have grace through which we may offer service that will please God, with reverence and fear, for indeed our God is a consuming fire. Chapter 13. Let brotherly friendship continue. But don't forget to be friendly to outsiders, for in so doing, some people, without knowing it, have entertained the angels. Remember those in prison and being mistreated, as if you were in prison with them and undergoing their torture yourselves. Marriage is honorable in every respect, and in particular, sex within marriage is pure, but God will indeed punish fornicators and adulterers. Keep your lives free from the love of money, and be satisfied with what you have. For God himself has said, I will never fail you or abandon you. Therefore we say with confidence, Yahweh is my helper, I will not be afraid. What can a human being do to me? Remember your leaders, those who spoke God's message to you. Reflect on the results of their way of life, and imitate their trust. Yah-Usha, the Messiah, is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Do not be carried away by various strange teachings, for what is good is for the heart to be strengthened by grace, not by food. People who have made these the focus of their lives have not benefited thereby. We have an altar from which those who serve in the tent are not permitted to eat. For the Kohen Hagadol brings the blood of animals into the holiest place as a sin offering. but their bodies are burnt outside the camp. So to Yah-Usha suffered death outside the gate, in order to make the people holy through his own blood. Therefore let us go out to him who is outside the camp and share his disgrace. For we have no permanent city here. On the contrary, we seek the one to come. Through him, therefore, let us offer God a sacrifice of praise continually. For this is the natural product of lips that acknowledge his name. But don't forget doing good and sharing with others, for with such sacrifices God is well pleased. Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they keep watch over your lives as people who will have to render an account. So make it a task of joy for them, not one of groaning, for that is of no advantage to you. Keep praying for us, for we are certain that we have a clear conscience and want to conduct ourselves properly in everything we do. And all the more I beg you to do this, so that I may be restored to you that much sooner. The God of Shalom brought up from the dead the great shepherd of the sheep, our Lord Yah-Usha, by the blood of an eternal covenant. May that God equip you with every good thing you need to do his will. And may he do in us whatever pleases him, through Yah-Usha the Messiah. To him be the glory forever and ever. Ameyn. Now I urge you, brothers, to bear with my message of exhortation, for I have written you only briefly. Know that our brother Timothy has been released. If he comes soon enough, I will bring him with me when I come to see you. Greet all your leaders and all God's people. The people from Italy send greetings to you. Grace be with you all. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Namaste.